Hear what everybody has to say about what happened after the tenants were evicted from the International Hotel in 1977, right?
78.
Or 77, demolition in 78, and then, but finally 79, the complete demolition. Yeah. So this was the committee that pulled together to
After the demolition.
after the demolition to figure out what should be done, you know. So these were like representative of the people that were angry about what was going on. Okay. And we're here in the building now as a result of their efforts.
Hey, you on the right say something?
Oh,
All right, that sounds good, actually.
okay.
That's good.
Yeah, my voice carried.
Okay, I'm Helen Marta Bautista.
Yeah, I'm Henry Durr.
And I'm Linda Wang.
Robles.
And I'm Harvey Dong.
All right, we can get started.
Okay, let's see. I have a number of questions that I thought maybe it could lead into some discussion or back and forth thing. I guess the first thing was that the tenants of the International Hotel were evicted August 4th, 1977. And I just had a general question in terms of how important was this hotel to the Manila town, Chinatown community? Okay, so maybe,
Al.
or how
Linda.
important was it to you? You know?
We're still here.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Well,
So-
how important, it was a place where a lot of Filipino workers, laborers come and stay in the hotel. A lot of merchant marines, a lot of merchant sailors stay. Also, we have a vibrant Filipino business. There was a restaurant owned by a Filipino man, Nes Aquino, and there was a barber shop owned by Mang Tino. I forgot his last name, but Mang Tino also supports a lot of musicians, or his friends bring their guitars and they play music while he's cutting hair in this little place where there was a barber shop. It also has a little community space that performers, dancers, musicians, artists use for artwork. I think that was called the Kearney Street Workshop, was held there. And as I remember, those were the places where I would come for lunch because the restaurant was there. And Nes Aquino happens to be my friend. And I was a young performer. I was a dance. I came from the Bayanihan, the National Dance Company of the Philippines, when I came to the United States in 1958. So that was was teaching dance for little children in the Filipino community at that particular time. So to me, that was important.
But I think the International Hotel was kind of the last vestige of the Filipino community that used to exist on Kearney Street. There were a number of residential hotels that were used by Filipino migrant workers and, as Helen said, merchant seamen. Also a lot of Chinese elderly lived in these hotels because Kearney Street bordered Chinatown. So it was the community was a very vibrant and lively community, and one by one, as the financial district moved, expanded, and came into Kearney Street, one by one those hotels disappeared and were knocked down to create office buildings. So the International Hotel was significant not only because it served as a place where people gathered and lived, but also because it became it was a symbol of the last place that the Filipino community had. Alan, you want to add to that?
Nancy, you want?
Go ahead.
The iHotel was more than a hotel. It was vibrant, it was the voice, it was really connected, across other communities, And that was during that time, there was a period of a lot of turmoil all over the struggle, the Vietnam War, Black Panthers, and changes in the community. So in a way, the struggle of the iHotel was a struggle of all people, even connected as far as Delano, the United Farm Workers. So I would say it's the voice and the struggle and resistance of, like what was happening and still happening now, the elderly and the young folks. But not only housing.
We should remember also sort of the socio-economic context of the 70s, because with the relaxation of immigration laws in the mid-1960s, the communities began to experience a steady flow of immigrants coming to the United States from Asia, Philippines, China, and other Asian countries. So there was a tremendous demand for adequate housing. And the iHotel provided low-cost housing, albeit single-room occupancy, which is very typical of the living conditions in this particular area. So it was a very important community center for residents and for young people, because there were community organizations that situated themselves in the iHotel and sort of had their beginnings, such as Kearney Street Workshop and other organizations. So it was very vibrant, but at the heart of it too was it provided an important service because housing was at a shortage. And it was not easy for a lot of families and men to get adequate housing if they were poorly paid or were not sufficiently employed.
I think at the time it was $35 a month. Is that $35 a month on the rooms? And so it was an easy access for a lot of people who are transients to pay for that whole month, $35 coming back and forth from Salinas, for instance, for the farmers or working in the farms as migrant laborers. So there was also this idea of it's cheap. And of course, Chinatown, you could get by in Chinatown for $5 for a whole lunch already, And then, so
I think it was cheaper then.
No, but at the time, your $5 could go so far.
Actually, $35, whatever that price was, it may seem low today, but it was still a lot of money in those
At
days.
the
Henry, they say, I'll pay you next week, okay?
Yeah.
How about Nancy?
I find it interesting that the iHotel has enduring value as a symbol for our community. And I think back in the 1970s, why a lot of people gravitated toward the hotel was because we had just gotten over that hippie rebellion of having nothing to do with our parents' generation. And it was just the formation of a lot of things that came together right at that time. The consciousness of rebelling against the status quo, the anti-Vietnam War protests, and also with it came a consciousness of us as Asian Americans in this country, which also meant looking at our parents' generation. And so with the iHotel, it was all these things, a struggle for social justice and also a way to connect with ancestors and with people of the former generation. To this day, I'm still talking to young people about the International Hotel because there's still this need among young people to connect with, their parents' generation, which now I'm a parent, so I am of that generation. And I just find it very interesting that in San Francisco, the iHotel has had this lasting value and it spreads across the country.
Okay, so the next question that I wanted to ask was, the eviction happened in 1977, and it was a very dark period when that happened. And the building was demolished in, I guess, 1978. What were your feelings at that time about the possibility of getting anything back as soon as that demolition happened? And how did you get on board to Mayor Feinstein's International Hotel Block Development Citizens Advisory Committee 1 year later? And this idea of the Citizens Advisory Committee was put forward first originally by Mayor Moscone, right? So how did you get on board this Citizens Advisory Committee? Well, the first part of the question is, were you optimistic about even getting anything back?
Of course not.
Are you kidding?
Then why did you join that committee?
Well, on my end, it was the first district election in San Francisco, and my friend Nancy Walker won on her district. And as a result of that, she asked me if I could represent, to be her representative to the Citizens Advisory Committee for this, to rebuild International Hotel. And I said, I don't want to run for any office. She said, so no. You just have to attend one meeting a month. Well,
She didn't say how many months.
my one meeting a month started in 1978. And I am still attending this maybe two meetings or 3 meetings a month as a result of it. But that was the intent, and it was then Mayor Moscone, who later was assassinated by Harvey Milk.
No, not by Harvey, no,
I mean,
by Dan White.
Dan White. Oh my God. Oh no. Harvey Milk was also assassinated at the same period. I'm sorry. Dan White and Harvey Milk, as you know, was the first gay man to run in office in San Francisco, and they were friends with Mayor Moscone, and both of them were assassinated. But nonetheless, it was when Mayor Moscone was assassinated, Dianne Feinstein took the realm as mayor. She was the president of the Board of Supervisors at that time. And as a result of memorializing Mayor Moscone's intent, she had this International Hotel for this particular block as a Citizens Advisory Committee. And we were recruited because we represent from, I suppose I was representing the Filipino community, and several members were from Chinese and Filipino community representation, and some from, before Judge Lowe became a judge, he was one of our members. And wasn't Pius Lee too?
No, he was never.
Mr. Lee was a member.
George Lee.
George Lee, originally. Well, you were.
So Chung, Etta Moon Chung,
It was Dan Gonzalez, Lamera,
Ted Tex.
Yeah.
There were a number of people who were appointed to the Citizens Advisory Committee who since have died. The committee's tenure has gone on for so long, And unfortunately, they weren't, they didn't make it to see the opening of the new I Hotel. But your earlier question, Harvey, about whether we were optimistic, I don't know if we were optimistic. We were a very determined group. I think that probably would be a better description. I think if I were to think back on the committee's work, I would think about how it was very single-minded about what needed to be done. And as a result, we were people who, when we were first appointed, many of us didn't know each other. Yeah, it wasn't like we were an already formed group that took over this task. We were a newly formed group, but with a very strong commitment to trying to rebuild the housing, the building that was lost, the I Hotel. And now we're optimistic because it happened. But at the time, after the eviction, I mean, people were so angry, truly angry that that could happen.
I mean, before the eviction, there was a long battle about whether the owner could evict the tenants and do some kind of commercial development. It was a very long battle. And during this time, I think to the credit of the political establishment in San Francisco, the political establishment was generally sympathetic to the I Hotel residents. So that really helped because this, the piece of land and the building was privately owned by an individual living in Thailand. And he and his family had grand plans to do something with this piece of property. They didn't disclose it in any great details, but they didn't buy it to be continuing the I Hotel in its usage that was at that particular time. So there was this big struggle so that when they finally prevailed to evict the tenants, because the sheriff at that time also was thrown into jail because he would not evict them, which is very unusual because sheriffs under California law has a responsibility to evict tenants if it's deemed to be a legal action, and he did not comply with that eviction notice, so he actually sat in jail for some period of time. But then, the good people lost. The owners got to evict. So after the eviction, there also was a struggle whether they could even tear down the building. And it was during that time that there was discussion about acquiring the building by eminent domain. So it was really that sort of political context that started the conversations after the building, after the tenants were evicted, and then the building was torn down. That started the conversation with Mayor Moscone about having a citizens advisory committee that would look at how this block would be developed. And of course, from the community perspective, was that we wanted to use whatever planning code requirements to stop commercial development from occurring at this site. And that was a major part of the battle. But we didn't know where it was going to go. Yeah, we had no idea.
How about Al? You have anything to add about your optimism or how you even got on board, and you were trying to round tenants up?
Well, I don't know how I got on board. All I know is after it went down, we were just running around, doing things and, wondering where all the tenants were going to move to, and they just scattered. They moved all over the place, right? But they were, some were still in the area, like San Joaquin, St. Paul, and hotels further down, Temple Hotel and the Stanford Hotel, Clayton and Justice and Royal, a lot of, Wahak and Edda, Stanford Hotel, and Lamera, Agnes, and they were all scattered. So and the thing was, yeah, there was still that turmoil on how do you bring, you know, the things together after all. It was like Linda said, there's a lot of anger, and we're still, you know, moving ahead, thinking of what to do, you know, right, and then slowly unfolding, you know, like people finally, you know, coming slowly together, and then I guess, and as the years went by, then you know, some of the folks that were, you know, connected with the I Hotel came together and wanted to find out, like, what can we do now, you know? And it was always like, what can we do now? Because it was like the anger and it was like a tragedy, you know, like, you know, and like utter turmoil, you know, finding our place back again, you know. How are we going to get back together, you know, like.
I think what was significant with the committee is that the members of the committee came from all walks of life. I was a school teacher, Linda was a mental health director or deputy at the time. We have Dr. Roland Lowe, who is a doctor at Chinese hospital. We had Judge Lowe. We have Wayne Alba, who is in the business part, real estate. And these are kind of smorgasbord of the community representing the group. And I think this is the reason we were so determined to make sure that what was taken out was going to be replaced. Also, at that particular time, some of our friends became members of the board, members of Planning Commission, like Sue Bierman. We had Roland, who else? Judge Lowe became a judge. I think Lillian Singh was also a member, and she became a judge. So that the kind of group we had were very active in community already.
There were also former
all
tenants.
Activists and some
former tenants. Like So Chung and Etta, and Etta Chung.
And
Tex
And Tex
Lamera.
George Lee was a great housing advocate. Joe Yui was a businessman in Chinatown, was very concerned about what happened and supported it throughout, from that point throughout the remainder of his life, the efforts that we made. So there were many people. You know, the eviction, Harvey, with the thousands of people who came in support of the tenants in the middle of the night, that really set the stage for our committee, I think, because it set the political will to make this happen. And even though it took decades, people didn't forget. The politicians did not forget. And the people in San Francisco did not forget what happened. So it made the work of the committee easier because there was political will to rebuild the I Hotel. And although it took so long, and we all wished it took much less time, it happened.
But Mayor Feinstein gave us 2 departments to work with our committee. The housing director was a member of our group or staff, and also the planning commission. So these 2 entities of government were our staff, so to speak, and because they knew about housing and they knew about the planning and all the sort of thing. And we, as members of the committee, really did not know anything about, how to build or any of this sort of thing. We were just very new about all of these things. So they became our technical group of people and represented us in a lot of hearings in the commission. And as a result of that, they were able to provide staff until the time we finished the transaction with HUD. That was the only time that the housing director did no longer report to us, to our group, when we already completed the signing of the HUD, whatever HUD requirements were. But all this time, the government entity was in support of our group. They were the focus persons for whatever happened in planning or code changes or whatever. They represented our committee.
Okay, so let's move on to, continuing on that, let's move on to what happened after, let's say, okay, in 1980, the San Francisco Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors approved the International Hotel Block Development Plan. So the advisory committee was appointed to pursue private-public development. Something like $1.3 million was committed to the development of this block. In 1982, interim zoning of the International Hotel from C2 to RC4, which is what, mixed use?
Mixed use.
Residential, commercial.
Residential.
Requiring
commercial.
housing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Requiring housing.
Requiring
Senior
housing.
Yes.
Okay. So this requirement was approved by the Planning Commission
Yes.
and the Board of Supervisors. The requirement was that housing be established on this site,
Yes.
and nothing else could be further
Well,
developed.
that
without
was the cinch there, because the planning commissioner chair or president was Sue Bierman, who has been our friend all through that time. And so when we approached this commission, and most of them had been our friends because we were all kind of community activists, and when they realized that this is the only thing that would change, because it was a commercial, this was a commercial block. And when we approached them to change it into a housing block, and they agreed to do that, that really made it the way we wanted it. And that changed the entire dynamics.
I think the zoning change still allowed for commercial, but it also required residential. And at that time, we were very concerned that the developer and the owner would just create more offices or whatever they thought would make money and not create any housing. And so we advocated at the Planning Commission as well as the Board of Supervisors for that change in the zoning of this block.
So this was a period where the advisory committee was attempting to negotiate some type of a plan with Four Seas Development, right? Working together. But it didn't work out, right? And what were some of the issues there in terms of why it didn't work out, you know? And then later, you had to actually go outside, right, to find another owner and then work with the new owner.
I think when Dianne Feinstein was mayor, what she charged the committee with was to try to develop the housing using a private partnership with private developer. And this turned out to be much more difficult than we would have ever guessed. We managed finally to work out an agreement with the Four Seas Corporation in, I think, about 1984, thereabouts, for a mixed-use development, including housing, commercial, parking. There was some opposition at the Planning Commission when the EIR was presented, the Environmental Impact Report was presented, and the Planning Commission did not act, and then the Four Seas pulled out. They withdrew their proposal. So this was a proposal that was signed off on by the Citizens Committee, by the city, and by the owner-developer. So it set us back tremendously.
Well, they sold it to another,
They
sold it to another developer. The property was sold to another developer.
no. Well, they changed their corporate name, as far as I could tell, from Four Seas to Pan Magna.
Oh, the Pan Magna. Okay.
Yeah.
So
But
they-
the reason why, the reason given for their withdrawal from this project was that it looked financially infeasible, which ended up, that problem was repeated actually several times between 1984 and 1994, when the committee struggled to try to find someone who would develop the property and create the housing.
So, while it looked like the deal was cinched, it actually wasn't really cinched because you still had to get them to agree.
Yes.
Right? And then finally, in 1994, Pan Magna Corporation agrees to sell the International Hotel for community use to the Catholic Archdiocese, right, in 1994. And the sale is finalized in 1998, and HUD awards, Housing Urban Development awards, something like $8.3 million for housing. What was the turning point there in terms of why did Four Seas and later Pan Magna, why did they decide to sell the property instead of holding on to the original plans after all these years, like several decades of this wrangling back and forth?
Well, before they decided to sell their property, the committee agreed to a joint project with St. Mary's, Catholic Chinese mission. St. Mary's, for many, many years, many decades, ran a school on the corner of Stockton and Clay. And it was an elementary school, primary school. And they had Chinese language classes after the school. But with the 1989 earthquake, Loma Prieta earthquake, that building suffered damage and required retrofitting. And the St. Mary's and the Catholic Archdiocese did not feel like they wanted to retrofit that particular building, and were looking for a new site. And they approached the Citizens Committee about a joint project because this property had been a hole in the ground since the eviction and demolition. So it had sat here empty for many, many, many years. And when the Citizens Committee agreed, the St. Mary's representatives made a trip to Thailand to talk with the owner of the property, Mahaguna, and persuaded him to sell the property to the Archdiocese. And so that agreement was worked out.
But I just want to mention that the Citizens Advisory Committee became an entity. We made ourselves into Kearney Street Housing Corporation, as a nonprofit corporation, because we realized that Citizens Advisory Committee doesn't do anything on a legal terms, because we were just answering to the mayors as advisors. And so politically, we opt to become a corporation, because that's the only way we could deal with other entity. And when Mahaguna will not sell to us, to Kearney Street Housing Corporation, but would sell to St. Mary's. But the hitch there was that St. Mary's cannot build unless there is a senior housing first. And that's the reason why it took upon all of us for an educational seminar on on housing. Because we thought by owning the land that we are in is our housing. But Stuart taught us, he was our consultant, to think about footprints. And that we own Kearney Street, and CDC became our partner. We own only the footprint of this area, of the housing area. We do not own.
We own the air rights.
The air rights. And that kind of gave us a chance of building a housing. Because our original idea was to own the land. And as a result of our education regarding ownership, that we were convinced that the air rights is also part ownership. So the land, we do not own the land. St. Mary's still own the land, but we own the Archdiocese, but we own the air rights to this particular area. So that was kind of a shift in our thinking. And before that, we, personally, I did not know anything about air rights, but that idea came to us from our consultant because we were really deadlocked on the ownership issue. But we realized it's better to own the air rights and have a building and not to have anything at all. So that was our kind of big concession on Kearney Street Housing Corporation. But then we need a partner because we don't know anything about building. I mean, our group was just, making sure that we are on course and make sure that we do what we were intended to do. And because of that, we had to find a partner. We had to find a building partner who knows about building. So we were approached by two partners, building partners. Was the Mercy Housing Corporation, and the other one was the Chinatown Development Corporation.
John Stewart.
And so the two corporations approached us, and we listened to their way of delivering and how we could best be served. Because we now have an idea how to proceed with ownership. And as a result of this, we voted, our committee, Kearney Street Housing Corporation, voted to have Chinese Development Corporation to be our housing partner. And that's how we know now about building. So on our end, on Kearney Street Housing, we really, I think our purpose was to make sure that we follow the intent of our mission, to make sure that we build housing for seniors. And we have so many concessions about this building one was originally we wanted over 125 units. And so we had to decrease our wants. We have to be very realistic as to how many we can accommodate. And Darren Feinstein, as mayor, wanted to be sure at the time we were developing the apartments that every apartment has a kitchen, a working kitchen, that every apartment has a nice space. And that was one of the things that Diane Feinstein, as our mayor, demanded from our committee to make sure that these are established as a premise on the units. So we accommodated that plan.
Okay, and then I have, I guess you could say it's one final question, unless we have further related. Okay, so this was after a 20-year period of intense meeting and even membership changes in terms of some of the members even passing on, right?
Yes.
And no longer being spiritually with the committee, but physically unable, right? So one last question I had was, then given, all this almost 2 decades of involvement with this committee, what did you individually learn from all this? Okay, so that's one question. And then a second part to it is, would these political and financial commitments have happened without the community pressure and input? Okay. So first, like what did you learn from all this, and would this have happened without this broad-based community support and pressure? Yeah. Okay.
We can meet day in and day out, but without the community participation, there's nothing. That's how I feel.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah, I very much agree with Al. The committee was very diligent in trying to make something happen. I mean, well, there have been hundreds of meetings and thousands of hours. I mean, just tremendous amount of effort put in. But without that community support, it wouldn't have happened. I think sooner or later the city would have forgotten. Even the most well-intentioned city staff and mayors would have forgotten. As it was, the committee managed to get the support of 5 mayors over that period of time, from Mayor Feinstein all the way to now Gavin Newsom, and millions of dollars, city money, as well as HUD money, federal money, was put in to build this building and to supplement the rents. It was a tremendous commitment, and it would not, even in '94, would not possibly have happened except that the city put this project as its #1 priority when it submitted it to the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department.
Well, also, I think within that application, Nancy Pelosi was now our
Helpful.
Congresswoman, Dianne Feinstein is now our senator, Barbara Boxer, and all of these political people had to support our group because they understand exactly what this is all about and the community. But I would like to also say that we made sure, our committee made sure that we were meeting in the housing department. All of our meetings have been there because we wanted to be sure that they understand it is their responsibility to make sure that this housing goes on. And up to the very end, we were meeting in the housing department, and their staff us committee, and only when HUD turned in the document that we are already signed off, that we stopped that. But up to that point, we made sure that the housing department acknowledges that it is still their mission to make sure that this happens. And we as committee members made sure that they understand that this is their responsibility as well. And I think on that level, this is how, what you learn is that you make sure that the officials understand what they have to do for you. And I think we did that all to the very end. And only by doing that, we became successful.
Thinking back to when the committee was formed, some of us took the position that the city should exercise eminent domain to just declare this piece of property as, what's the term?
Government.
Derelict,
Yeah.
and that it was in the best interest of the public to acquire this building away from the private owner. And I remember in meeting with Feinstein, she just shot down the idea. And some of us were very frustrated with that she didn't want to pursue it. Now, looking back at it, she may have been right that if the city had pursued eminent domain, it may have taken a long legal fight with the owner to get this piece of property and then to develop the housing. As it is, it still took a long time to have basically a public-private partnership.
And she ended up using a potential eviction as an attempt to arm twist the
Yeah.
owner. Finally
Right.
she got to that point.
Of using eminent domain as if you don't do it, we'll impose it. So really the lesson learned is this kind of struggle really took a long time because so much is at stake in terms of property, the will of the people, community needs, and just the corporate economic interests of the owner. And the owner himself had his own little representatives in the community kind of representing him or throwing ideas about what could be done. Because, you know, that's what people with money can do. They can hire lobbyists, they can hire representatives to sort of advance their interest. So it took a long time, and as Linda said, went through 5 mayors, a lot of meetings, and I have to admit that I was not one of the more active committee members, because during this whole time, I actually, even though I continued to live in San Francisco, I worked up in Sacramento, but this project would not die because people were very determined to make sure that that the legacy of the iHotel would not be disrespected, that the housing is still needed today. I mean, there are hundreds of people, thousands of people applied for housing.
8,000.
Yeah, and it was
There
not.
were 8,000 applicants.
8,000.
For this building.
Yeah,
For
I
this
mean,
building.
how many units are here? It's not
104.
4. I mean, so when you look at 104 units and 8,000 applications, I mean, look at the need. I mean, the need still exists. As a matter of fact, it's probably worse today.
Well, we have a waiting list,
Yeah.
I just found out, of 6,000.
Yeah, so,
So on paper right now, we have a waiting list of 6,000.
and then at the end of this year, I'm going to be eligible.
Unfortunately, we cannot apply to be.
I want to be Social Security eligible.
No, you cannot apply. See, we unfortunately.
Only eligible by age.
By age. I just want to say that one of the things I think is that the fact that we really did not know what to do as a community. We knew we had a mission to finish, but we really did not understand the ramification of all the things that we have gone through. We had to go through the architectural design for the building. We had to go to the zoning issues. We had to go through vacating a little property. There's a 6x4 land on the end, which is an alley that we had to vacate, and we had to go and ask the planning commission to sell it to us. And at the time, our favorite friend, who was the president of the tenants housing on the Hill, wanted our committee to pay $80,000 for that little plot of land to vacate. I was speaking for our committee at that time. And as a result, this is one reason so I'm not too happy with him. As a result, I talked to the Planning Commission, and at that time, Leland Yee was president of the Finance Committee. And I reminded Leland Yee that it is his important mission to make sure that we make this whole building ours, including that little property. So at the end of that meeting, he charged us $2,000 instead of the $80,000 that our friend was asking that we pay for. So there are a lot of things that went into this whole thing. And then there is a property leaning in back of us, and it took Willie Brown, our mayor Willie Brown, to make the ultimate negotiation with the property owner in the back. because it was pending. We cannot build because it was hanging. It was in our back. There were so many really details that really needed patience on our end.
The owner wanted money, that's what he wanted.
But then it took the mayor, to give us that edge, and he was able to get it. So there's so many different pieces to this that is really a whole kind of puzzle. But then, as a committee, we were determined to make sure that every little roads that we stumbled into, that we are able to find our way and make sure that we know the person that we needed to talk to. In other words, you really need to know your network. Because if, for instance, we did not go to Mayor Brown, it will not finish. But when we went to Mayor Brown, we had to go to several other people to make sure that the wall or the path is clear to do that. So I hope there is a course for community people, how to unravel, how do you unravel this kind of path? And we just did it by just kind of knowing who we're dealing with, because most of them have been our friends in different commissions. So I suppose the lesson learned is that make sure your friends are elected in office, and make sure that when they're elected, you consistently tell them what you are doing and what the community still needs in order to get it going. So make sure that, whatever happens, that you are always in touch with your political friends as well as your community friends.
I wasn't a member of the advisory committee through the years, but I truly appreciate the work of the committee, because it just points out to how this hotel really required everybody's participation, from the mayors to the advisory committee to Manila Town Heritage Foundation that was formed in 1994, to everybody to keep the mission alive of rebuilding this hotel. And from my end, because I work in the arts, I was part of Kearney Street Workshop, which was here, but I've come around back here working for Manila Town Heritage Foundation, which every year since the time of eviction, we've had a commemoration on the block on August 4th to keep that memory alive and to build community around rebuilding the hotel. And even when, after all the work that you guys have done, even when the hotel was finally ours to be rebuilt, somebody had to, it's one thing to build a building and have low-income housing. It's another thing to revive the culture that was here, because there were so many decades when everybody was scattered. And so to revive this culture, it's a miracle that we have this space, and we wouldn't have it except for generous donors like Dado and Maria Volatile, who helped with the capital campaign to even build what we have. What little we have here is owed a lot to donors like them and to community support. So it's truly a miracle to have this building again, but it also speaks to the determination and to the resilience of the human spirit that won't let an injustice die.
Well, actually, the committee wanted to be sure that there is a cultural aspect to the housing. And I think Linda Wang was instrumental in getting a grant to the Manila Town, because we wanted a cultural aspect in the building. But at that time, Emil was not doing all these August 4th vigil, but was not really working on a nonprofit on the Manila Town Heritage Foundation. Linda Wang got them a lawyer and got a grant for the Manila Town Heritage Foundation from the San Francisco Foundation to start them and making sure that they develop a nonprofit entity. And it was because of that they are, you know, nonprofit now, and that they're doing their work, and that the mission is the cultural mission here in the building. So it took a lot of effort, but you see, in the planning, in the original plan, the cultural aspect was not there. The committee had to move the agenda to make sure that there is a cultural aspect in the building, and that's the reason we have this floor for that.
So as a result of the Manila Town Heritage Foundation, we have a richer program for residents and community people, and a program that reminds us of the history of this site, as well as the heritage that comes with that. Helen, you mentioned lawyers. I think we would be remiss if we didn't mention the help that we received from 3 lawyers. Steve Phillips.
For Kearney Street.
Yes, Steve Phillips, at Morrison and Forster at the time, helped us for many years. Joanne Sakai, who helped us in the mid-90s and then moved on to the
Redevelopment.
city attorney's office, actually. And then she eventually was with Redevelopment Agency. And also Alan Lowe, who also provided pro bono services. All 3 lawyers provided pro bono services to our group. In terms of what we've learned, it's easy to tear down a building. Look how long it took us to rebuild it. It was a week or 2, and it was demolished, and it took us decades to rebuild. So when we tear down housing, we have to do it with great, really consider very seriously the impact. I think the other thing that I learned was that the determination of a relatively small, motley group of people who didn't know each other but were single-minded in wanting to make this happen. It worked. It did work through much effort and through much support. It actually came to fruition.
Actually, Kearney Street, the original Citizens Advisory Committee, we had a large roster in the past. Today, there are only about 10 people left. And
It started off 19.
And as a result of attrition, our committee has really not expanded because our original mission was a directive from the mayor's office. And so therefore, we never added any new members on our end. And so our membership would die off according to the attrition of age and maybe mental facilities as a result of it. But in a case, I think maybe we are the only case in the entire United States that a group like this had stood together for over 20 years.
Run by
and
the elderly,
still,
right?
No.
still,
We've
30
become
years.
elderly.
still together.
30
We've
years.
grown old
I
together.
know.
We have grown
The
old
elderly,
together.
30 years, not
30 years.
Yeah, 30 years.
Well, we're challenging these young people today, I think, basically, for what we learned. That basically we are putting upon you from the lessons we have learned and the dedication that at least we shared with you, that possibly it would be a new mission on your end, to take a job or to take what do you call advisory committee and make sure that you make the goals a success. As I said, originally our intention was over 125 units, but there are certain things we have to take back. And so on our end, 104 is okay. I mean, we cannot say no because we wanted a housing project. And so 104 is all right. We have to swallow the others. But in the long run, I think we are happy that the community is using the space, that the cultural development is ongoing, and that today I think we have advanced the idea of senior housing, and hopefully we would develop a lot more senior housing in the future.
Thank you, Harvey,
Thank you.
for
Thank you. Thanks, Al.
Thank you, Isaac.
Helen.
Isaac
Nancy,
for taping this.
Linda. Okay, so this is an important part of our international hotel history, is in terms of the daily workings of the Citizens Advisory Committee and how the committee was able to finally get the job done, right? And I asked the question about optimism more out of the fact that when the hotel tenants were evicted, I wasn't very optimistic myself. And optimism, I'm sure, was a question that everybody had. And you answered that with the question about being determined, and single-minded, right? Okay, so let's give the committee here a hand.
All right.